Right, it's been a little bit of a while since I talked about a new drone or did anything for this channel, so apologies there. But on the plus side, at least you haven't had too many irritating things if you were generous enough to subscribe. Oh God, I said the word subscribe. I really didn't want to be like everyone else. So anyway, here is the new DJI, not Mavic, here's the new DJI Mini 3, Mini 3 Pro, which is a top-end drone that is still in the ultralight under 249 gram category. What I've got here is also the new DJI RC, which is just 5 grams heavier than the standard N1 remote, but includes a built-in screen, and of course once you've connected your phone to the other screen, that actually ends up being quite a bit heavier, so that's rather nice. That's optional, obviously. The unbelievably light aircraft itself, with admittedly one of the things I dislike, the plastic things, but I think we can forgive it that. And this from the Fly More kit, the bag and battery charging hub, which charges 3 batteries at once. Got the in and out, so you can run a feed out to charge something else as well, and popping up the lights there. So let's try and use this time efficiently, not least because I'm not quite sure how much time there is left on my camera, and also because I've waited a bit too long to get around to recording this. So a few years ago now, the 249 gram limit came in, and I think we all thought that was going to be quite restrictive, that certain features were going to end up on heavier aircraft, and for a time being that's certainly been the case. Especially DJI have had the Mini, or Mavic Mini as was, and the Mini 2, which have managed to get up to 4K. In fact, the Mini 2 also has little vents at the front that make it look like it's got collision sensors, but they don't. They are just vents. And then there's also now the Mini SE, which is a cheaper. It comes in about £260, I think. Sort of $300 territory. So it's certainly the sort of thing you can imagine being bought to a toy for some people, some very lucky people. And that can capture 2.7K video, and it can hover very well. And in a world where 500 meters is the acceptable range, the power of the transmission is not that much. So DJI have actually come up against Autel. Autel Nano has been the first drone to put sensors in the front, and they announced this back in September 2021, and it finally started shipping in the beginning of 2022. So they were not the first to bring out a drone which had sensors in this category, but collision sensors are important to a lot of people because they certainly bring an element of safety, and that's also safety that when you're starting to invest the sort of money that this aircraft cost, and this aircraft costs the wrong side of £600, $700. So, and that's before you start adding the Pro controller. You can start to understand why people might want to spend a little bit more, or you can start to understand why people might want to protect their investment. What I think this drone does, though, is make very clear that there is a new category within the ultralight. Ultralight is obviously now crucial and important simply because of that rule that requires registration above that in the FCC, the US space. Actually, as a camera drone in the UK here, we have to register anyway. This device has been crammed with features, to be honest, more than I genuinely more than I believe it's possible to fit in something this size, to make a clear distinction between the SE at the cheaper end, possibly keeping the Mini 2 as a sort of medium drone in that weight category, and Pro, and that's definitely not an accident that it's a Mini 3 Pro at the top. And here you can see these bulbous lumps on the top. The other thing that's slightly strange about it is just how much space there is around the f1.7 camera, which it's got nice big pixels because it's a 48 megapixel, or it's a dual ISO sensor, which is very much a similar territory as was being covered by the Mavic Air 2, which one can only assume will now be retired. I'm just going to power up, hopefully that won't upset the video too much, because there's one other trick which you may or may not have heard of, which it's worth showing you. So far so familiar, right? Device is starting. It's worth saying this can do 16 meters a second along level ground, which is about 36 miles an hour, which is plenty fast enough. And it that's in sport mode. It goes a bit slower, obviously, in normal speed. And at normal speed, it can stop itself pretty successfully. If you try and fly it into an object, it will detect an object like a tree or a person. It's disappointed there that I haven't put a storage card in the bottom as I power up. I left it on Pro mode. Switching it to auto, you can hopefully see. It handles the light well with this this new image sensor. That's no question. But this is the new button. Keep your eye on the camera. Whoop. Don't know. I can now turn and rotate the camera between portrait and vertical mode thanks to an additional button. That is a big feature aimed very squarely at the social media market, because, as I'm sure you know, most Instagram, most TikTok videos are viewed in portrait format, and the resolution up until now is largely lost as images are rotated from video the other way. So here we can actually turn the camera, and that creates obviously a camera which admittedly loses out on, as at the moment at least, it can shoot in the 48 pixels in this format, but it is not able to enter the master shots functions, and it's not able, it also says it's not able to use focus tracking while we're not in flight, but I'm fairly sure that we're not able to use subject tracking features when we're in the portrait mode, and I think that will change over time, which is a little bit disappointing, because obviously those are the sort of things that will look amazing and will really appeal to the social media market. Still, it's good to know that they're coming. Perhaps while I'm talking about it, I should power it down, but you can admire some of the clips I shot. DJI were kind enough to let me have a look at this early, which means I've been trying it out with admittedly slightly early software, but I've been able to fly it and try it and have a look at some of the footage and some of the stills that it produces, and I have been pretty impressed. I found it very, very hard to distinguish the difference between, admittedly, a slightly smaller sensor on this camera than on the old Air 2, but that drone is 570 grams, this is 249 grams, and it features the same 48 megapixel option. It features the same ability to produce HDR images. In fact, that the dual ISO function means if you're shooting at 30 frames a second and below, well, yeah, and 30 frames a second and I guess the 25 frames a second, it is examining the image, and it's difficult to describe, but it does look really good. The shadow areas definitely have rich detail. Some of that goes a little bit when you pop up to 60 frames a second, but you can pop up to 60 frames a second. That 4K 60 frames per second is available, which is impressive enough. It's certainly something that wasn't an option in the Mini 2, for example. And in that, you still see some great video. Here's a sample, but you will notice if you look carefully at some of the areas around the tree trunks, that kind of thing, that the video is a little less subtle in its color detail, and you definitely see an element of noise. That's, again, certainly very little to complain about, and again, you know, looked at as a whole image on a screen, you're unlikely to pick up on that kind of thing. It's one of those things where if you're trying to find problems, you will find them. And I guess that's my job here. But step back and remember that this is 249 grams. It has collision sensors, and really the only time when I was flying to really generate a sort of problem image, and it wasn't something I was able to recreate, was when I was flying backwards at an angle as hard as possible in sport, and I think the wind created a certain amount of turbulence and possibly a bit of vibration, because there's a certain amount of jello in the video that didn't seem to be successfully stabilized. But other than that, there's little evidence. When the machine has an up-to-date version of the pilot assistance orbiting features that we've seen in previous DJI drones, which it's nearly as powerful as the Mavic 3 there. It's more powerful than the Air 2, and under the weight limit, which is exciting. Obviously, the only real issue is that it is such a light device that it will only work in a certain amount of wind, and that's always going to be the case, and there's no changing physics. If you're going to set a rule, and that's certainly not DJI's fault, that says this is a safe weight and 250 grams and above is not such a safe weight, then the best that can be done, and I think this is probably the best that can be done, is to try and work within it. And the power of these motors and the speed at which they react to vibrations is almost perfect. And the shot that demonstrates that most is the one orbiting me, keeping the drone at head height, which means that it comes over and under the horizon, so every little gust is exaggerated, and it handles that while also tracking my movements entirely automatically, and I think that says an awful lot for the AI in this little device. So I am very excited by this. I more so than by most drones I've seen in a long time. I'm also going to say that I think it's a more successful use of the sensors than in the recent Autel for slightly less money. So Autel have had their little moment in the sun by putting safety sensors on their 249 gram drones, but I've got to say that they've now once again sort of stepped back a little bit, because DJI have come and they've produced this drone and it's got everything you'd want. The software is just a little bit better behaved, and they've come in a little cheaper, although by no means cheap. On which subject, the new RC controller, it's 5 grams heavier than the N1 controller. These are both 0.3, so that's 12 kilometers of range, which is a lot more than you need in a 500 meter area. The sticks pop in the back there, pop out the front, and the screen is bright but could be brighter. You'll see USB-C connector for charging as a host, an additional one, and you can plug in a memory card, micro SD, for example, taking a screen recording. This is essentially an Android phone with everything stripped out. I find this really nice, actually. I've always been skeptical of having a screen below rather than above my hands, but the weight balance is such that it's quite a nice thing, and my thumbs don't interfere with my view that much. So actually I found this device to be very, very successful, and to be honest, worth it these days, because the phone does risk interrupting work when you're flying, and with the battery life, and the battery life is pretty impressive. Now I've only flown this with the batteries I was supplied with, which are the standard ones, and they offer, well, in theory, a bit over 30 minutes. In practice, it wasn't that long, over 20 minutes, before I was being asked to land the drone, which still seems pretty good to me. And I suspect that would be something I'd get more used to over time. But there are batteries, or let me just check the yes, this is the Intelligent Flight battery. There is an Intelligent Flight Battery Plus, which offers well over 40 minutes flight, again based on the standard forward motion of about 20 miles an hour, in some markets. I don't know what those markets are, but in some markets, so we'll look forward to that. So I think that's also something to be really excited about, that DJI are providing opportunities. They're selling this drone with no controller at all, in case you've already got an OM3 compatible controller, with the standard controller, or with the new screen-based controller. And they're providing a choice of battery, the one which exactly manages the 249 gram limit, or a larger battery, which obviously pushes another 40 grams but gives you longer flight time. Now, all that choice, that's a good thing. It's hard to complain about. It shows that there really is a sort of pro option to be had. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed my little look at the Mini 3 Pro, and let me know what you're thinking about it, and whether you're thinking about getting one yourself. Personally, I have to say, it is a very tempting choice, because it's just, it feels like it would get around a lot of the rules that are coming in and starting to make other aircraft feel slightly problematic. You know, the weight of my old Mavic 2 is definitely now an issue, without it having the quality that you feel you deserve for that level of inconvenience. Whereas here we've got an impressive aircraft, it's easy to control and easy to fly, and honestly the only other thing that bothered me actually was that when I was flying it very quickly along the ground, I did find it hard to climb as quickly as I would like. I thought it climbed quite slowly if it was already accelerating fast, but maybe that's a tweak in the settings I need to get to. So I'd love to know if you guys have similar experiences. Thanks for watching. Cheers.